The cameras were still rolling when no one realized they were watching something that would later feel unforgettable. It was an ordinary filming day on the surface. Lights flooded the set, assistants moved quickly between scenes, and directors called final adjustments with the usual urgency of production life. Yu Menglong stood quietly near the edge of the set, already dressed in costume, reading over his lines one last time. Nothing about the moment suggested history. Yet months later, fans would return to this exact footage again and again, asking the same question. Was this his final goodbye hidden in plain sight? After his passing in September 2025, one of the strongest waves of discussion online centered around what many believed was his last major on-screen performance. Fans revisited the drama, not just as viewers, but almost like investigators of emotion. Scenes that once felt beautifully acted suddenly carried a different weight. Dialogue sounded more personal. Expressions seemed more reflective. Silence between words felt louder. The performance itself was subtle, which made it even more powerful. He played a character standing at the edge of personal loss, someone learning how to let go without bitterness. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic breakdowns. Instead, there were long pauses, quiet glances, and the kind of restrained emotion that had always defined Yu Menglong's acting style. One scene quickly became the center of attention. His character stood alone at dusk, watching city lights appear one by one in the distance. The wind moved softly around him as he delivered a single line about people leaving pieces of themselves behind, even after they are gone. At the time, audiences praised the scene for its elegance. After September 2025, it became something else entirely. Fans called it chilling. The clip spread across social media with slowed music and emotional captions. Some wrote that it no longer felt like acting. Others said it seemed like he was speaking directly to the audience, as though he knew the scene would carry meaning beyond fiction. The comments filled with disbelief, tears, and endless replaying of the same few seconds. One viewer wrote, "It feels like he was saying goodbye, and we didn't understand it then." That sentence was shared thousands of times. Soon, older behind-the-scenes footage from the same production began resurfacing. In one short clip, Yu Menglong sat quietly between takes, staring at the script while the crew prepared the next shot. Someone behind the camera joked with him, and he smiled softly before returning to silence. It was an ordinary moment, but fans began attaching significance to it. There was another video from the final wrap day. The cast stood together for photos, smiling and celebrating the end of filming. When the camera turned toward him, he gave a small bow and thanked everyone with his usual calm humility. Nothing dramatic happened. Yet now, viewers replayed that moment like it contained an answer. The emotional power came from what was missing. There were no public declarations, no final speech, no obvious sign that this would be remembered differently. That absence created the mystery. Fans filled the silence with meaning because sometimes silence feels louder than explanation. Entertainment commentators began discussing the phenomenon. They pointed out how audiences often reinterpret final performances after loss. What once seemed like normal acting becomes symbolic because viewers need connection. In Yu Menglong's case, the emotional precision of his performance made that reinterpretation even stronger. He had always been known for restraint. Unlike actors who relied on dramatic intensity, he often worked through stillness. A pause, a shift in expression, the slightest hesitation in his voice. That style created intimacy. It made viewers feel as though emotions were being discovered rather than performed. When people revisited his final scenes, that intimacy became almost overwhelming. Another scene drew attention weeks later. His character was sitting in silence with an older mentor figure. There was a long conversation about unfinished dreams and how some people leave before they are fully understood. At one point, he smiled faintly and said, "Maybe being remembered quietly is enough." Fans could not stop talking about that line. Screenshots of the dialogue flooded platforms. Tribute videos placed those words over still images of him walking away from the camera. Some edits added piano music underneath, turning the moment into something that felt almost like a farewell letter. Whether intentional or not no longer mattered. What mattered was how it made people feel. Streaming platforms reported renewed interest in the drama. People who had never watched it before began searching for the final episodes just to understand the scene everyone was talking about. Older fans returned for rewatches, finding details they had missed the first time. A slight smile, a look held half a second longer. Small things became emotionally enormous. Even co-stars were drawn into the reflection. Past interviews resurfaced where cast members described him as thoughtful, reserved, and deeply committed to emotional truth in performance. One co-star mentioned that he often preferred fewer takes if the emotion felt honest the first time. Another said he believed silence on screen could be stronger than dialogue. These comments only deepened the sense that his final performance had been something special. Fan artists began creating illustrations inspired by the now famous dusk scene. Many showed him standing alone against glowing city lights, coat moving gently in the wind. Others painted symbolic versions with fading stars or unfinished letters drifting through the air. These images spread rapidly, turning fiction into memory. Months later, the question still remained. Was it truly a secret farewell? There was never proof of that. No confirmation. No hidden message officially revealed. But perhaps that was why the idea remained powerful. It existed in the space between certainty and feeling, where audiences build meaning from emotion rather than facts. For many fans, the answer was not important. The performance had already become personal. It reminded them of how art changes after loss. A scene can transform because the person behind it is no longer here. Dialogue can sound different when memory enters it. A final performance becomes more than entertainment. It becomes a place people return to when they want to remember. And that is exactly what happened. His last on-screen role stopped being just another drama and became part of his legacy. Not because it was designed as a goodbye, but because audiences turned it into one. Through rewatches, tributes, and shared emotion, they gave the scenes a second life. In the end, perhaps the most powerful farewells are not the ones announced loudly. They are the quiet ones. The moments that only reveal themselves later. A line spoken at dusk. A smile between takes. A final bow at the end of filming. Nothing extraordinary in the moment. Everything unforgettable after. And so fans continue watching, not searching for proof, but for presence. In every quiet scene, every restrained glance, every unfinished silence, they find what feels like a final message. Not goodbye. Just remember me. As the months passed, the discussion around Yu Menglong's final on-screen performance only grew stronger. What began as a simple rewatch by loyal fans slowly turned into a larger cultural moment. Even people who had never followed his career closely found themselves drawn into the conversation, curious about why one particular scene had left such a lasting emotional impact. Late at night, fan communities organized watch parties dedicated entirely to that final episode. Thousands of viewers joined at the same time, replaying the same scenes together and sharing their thoughts in real time. Some focused on the dialogue, carefully analyzing every line. Others paid attention to the silences, the moments where he said nothing at all. Many believed those pauses carried the deepest meaning. One especially discussed moment came near the end of the episode. His character stood by a window while rain touched the glass outside. There was no music in the background, only the quiet sound of a storm. He looked out for several seconds before softly saying that some departures are not meant to be explained, only accepted. Fans described the scene as devastating, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt so calm. That calmness became the center of the conversation. People wrote long reflections about how his acting always made emotions feel real instead of performed. He did not demand attention from the audience. Instead, he invited them into silence. That quality made his final scenes feel deeply personal, as though each viewer was having a private conversation with him through the screen. Editors on short video platforms turned those scenes into cinematic tributes. Slow piano music, soft fades, and subtitles of his final lines created videos that spread quickly across the internet. One edit opened with the words, "What if he was telling us goodbye all along?" That single sentence triggered millions of views and countless emotional comments. Some fans began comparing this final performance to earlier roles from his career. They noticed a pattern in the kinds of characters he chose. People who carried emotion quietly, who loved deeply but rarely spoke loudly about it, who understood endings before others did. This observation made the secret farewell theory feel even more believable to those who admired him. There was also growing attention around interviews from the same period. In one resurfaced clip, Yu Menglong spoke about legacy and how actors are remembered. He said he hoped people would remember sincerity more than fame. The quote spread rapidly because it matched exactly how fans were now describing him. It felt less like a statement and more like a reflection of everything he had left behind. Streaming numbers for his dramas continued rising. New viewers discovered him through the viral discussion, and older fans returned with fresh emotion. What was once just another project in his career had transformed into something symbolic. The final performance became a place where people gathered, not just to watch, but to feel. In the end, whether it was truly intended as a farewell may never be known. But perhaps that uncertainty is what makes it so powerful. The lack of a clear answer allows each person to find their own meaning in the scenes. And that is why fans keep returning. Not because they are searching for proof, but because somewhere in those quiet moments, in the rain against the window and the unfinished words at dusk, they still feel his presence. And sometimes, that feeling is stronger than any explanation could ever be.